Welcome to this Sleepy God's bedtime story, where you will be guided into a deep and peaceful sleep with ancient myths that help you forget the stress of modern life. I'm your host tonight, Henry, and I'll be your guide into the world of myth and wonder. But before we begin our journey, let's take a moment to settle in. Make sure you're in a comfortable position. Release any tension in your shoulders, your jaw, even your fingertips. Now gently bring your attention to your breath. Breathe in slowly and let it out. Even slower. Again, in and out. Let the weight of the day fade into the background. There's nothing to worry about now, just you and this quiet moment. Tonight, we'll journey beyond the veil of time to a place where gods once walked and ancient stories still echo through the stars. Now, close your eyes and let your imagination drift as we step into a story older than memory. Before anything began, there was no earth beneath your feet, no stars above your head, no wind to carry your breath, no light to warm your skin. There were no names, no borders, no sound, just a space, wide and endless and still. This place was Ginnungagap, the great yawning gap, a silent cradle of becoming, a waiting breath between all things. But outside this silence, two realms had already formed. To the north, there was Niflheim, a realm of ice, fog, and endless cold. Its rivers froze in place, its winds whispered in frost. And to the south, there was Muspelheim, a realm of fire, burning bright and wild, with no ceiling, no cage, only flame licking upward into nothing. These realms did not touch, not yet. For a long, long time, they stood apart, their powers pressing out into the void, but never meeting. Until one day, in Ginnungagap, the frost from the north began to drift further. The heat from the south surged closer. They moved not by choice, but by nature, drawn together by the tension of emptiness. And when they finally touched, there was no thunder, no clash, no violence, just a whisper, soft and quiet, as heat kissed ice, and ice softened into water. From that water, something began to form. Drop by drop, it gathered shape, not by hands, not by plan, but by balance, by the quiet meeting of two opposing things. The first life, heavy, shapeless, and still, not awake, not aware, only there. This was Ymir, the first of all beings, a giant born from melting ice and quiet fire. He did not breathe yet, he did not move, but his presence filled the gap, and Ginnungagap, once hollow and bare, was now home to something more. Ymir did not wake, he did not speak, he did not dream, as humans do. But something stirred within him, a deep, ancient rhythm like the tide in a sea with no moon. Time passed without name. Moments drifted like mist, soft and formless. The gap was quiet again, and in that quiet, life continued to shape itself. From beneath Ymir's arm, a shape began to grow, slowly, gently, as if rising from still water. Another shape followed, 2 figures, one after the other, neither man nor woman, neither child nor beast, only beings, vague and silent, born from the warmth of stillness. From the folds of his skin, from the curve of his legs, more shapes began to take form. Not many, just a few. Enough to whisper, "We are here." These new forms did not open their eyes. They did not move far. They simply drifted, floating in the dark like seeds waiting for soil. And Ymir, still unaware, remained the center of it all. Heavy and vast, his body hummed with something new, a quiet hum of growth, of change. Around him, the air no longer felt hollow. It shimmered faintly, as if the breath of life was beginning to warm the dark. Time did not tick, it pulsed, soft and slow. There was no hurry, only becoming. And from that becoming, a world began to imagine itself. In the quiet stillness of Ginnungagap, life continued. Ymir lay unmoving, surrounded by the drifting shapes born from his form. But he was not alone. From the same melting ice that had shaped Ymir, another presence emerged. It was not a giant, not a being of great power, but a cow, a great, gentle creature, covered in frost with long, curling horns and breath like mist. Her name was Audhumla. She stood in the silence, calm and unafraid, as if she had always been there. From her udders, 4 rivers of milk flowed. Rich and white, they streamed across the void and nourished Ymir, who drank without waking. She gave without question, and the gap, once dry and hollow, grew full and soft with the soundless motion of life. But Audhumla needed nourishment too, so she turned to the ice, thick, glittering walls of ancient frost. She pressed her tongue to its surface and began to lick, slowly, steadily, day by day. With each motion, the ice began to change. On the first day, something like hair appeared beneath the surface, not grown, but revealed. On the second day, a shape, like a head, became visible, still buried in the frozen wall. And on the third day, the ice gave way completely. A man stepped forth. He was not like Ymir, not a giant born from melting drops. He was tall, strong, quiet. His hair shone like starlight on snow. His gaze was calm, not sleeping, but awake, aware. This was Buri, the first of his kind, born not from fire and frost, but from salt and patience. He did not speak, not yet, but in his presence the silence changed. Something had shifted, something new had entered the gap, not just life, but shape and mind and purpose. And still Ymir slept. Time passed again, not in moments or days, but in slow turns of becoming. Within Ginnungagap, life gathered in silence. Ymir remained vast and still. Buri stood like stone, watching the darkness shift. From Buri, a son was born, and from that son, 3 more were born, brothers, Odin, Vili, and Ve. They were unlike the beings before them. They were not formless. They were not drifting. They were sharp in thought, clear in sight. The first to walk with purpose. They looked upon Ginnungagap and saw a place unfinished, a space full of life but without meaning. They watched Ymir sleep, his breath slow and heavy, his body vast enough to block the shape of a sky. He had no malice, no hunger, but he held everything, and in that holding there was no room for anything new. The brothers did not fear him, but they knew something had to change. So they approached, not with swords, but with knowing. And when the moment came, they acted, not with hatred, but with resolve. The stillness broke, not with sound, not with fire, but like ice cracking under the weight of spring. Ymir did not cry out. He did not resist. He faded, slowly, like mist in the morning sun. And from his body, the world began to take shape. His flesh turned into land. His bones rose and formed the mountains. His teeth broke apart and shaped the cliffs and jagged stone. His blood spread outward and became the sea, deep, wide, and blue. His skull was lifted and turned to sky. High and arched, it became the ceiling of all things. From sparks that flew out with his final breath, stars began to flicker, soft and far away. And in that moment, the gap was no longer a gap. It was a world. The world had form, but it had no name. No place had yet been called anything. No voice had said, "This is where we are." Odin and his brothers stood beneath the new sky. They looked upon the land they had shaped. Mountains rising, rivers flowing, oceans stretching into the dark. They began to give the world its first sounds. Words, soft and slow, fell from their lips like seeds. They named the seas, they named the stars, they gave titles to the wind, to the trees, to the deep and waiting earth. Each word was a breath, each name a root, and with every breath the world deepened. It became more real, more awake. From Ymir's eyelashes they built a wall, a wide, circular boundary. Inside that wall, they made a place for people. They called it Midgard, the middle realm, a shelter in the vastness, a home not too far from the stars, not too close to the fire. They shaped the sky from his skull and placed 4 dwarves to hold it up, north, south, east, and west. They set the sun and moon in motion. Chased by wolves, they would rise and fall, marking time where before there had been none. They took sparks from Muspelheim and scattered them across the heavens, stars small and still, to light the night, to keep dreamers company while they slept beneath this new roof. And so, the formless became form, the unnamed was named, and the silence was given rhythm. The world had begun. The world was ready. The sky had its lights. The ground had its rivers. The seas had their tides. But the land was still quiet, still waiting. Odin and his brothers walked the shores of Midgard. They passed cliffs and stones, trees rising like columns beneath the soft new stars. On a windswept beach, they found 2 fallen trees. One was ash, the other elm. Worn smooth by time and tide, they lay side by side, silent and weathered. The brothers paused. They looked upon the trees and saw not wood, but possibility. Odin knelt first. He placed his hand upon the ash and breathed. From his breath came life, a heartbeat, a pulse, a stirring deep within the grain. Vili stepped forward. He gave the gift of mind, awareness, memory, the quiet hum of thought. Ve came last. He reached out and gave them form, a face, a voice, and the ability to move. And so, from ash and elm, 2 beings rose. One was called Ask, the other Embla, the first humans. The first to open their eyes beneath the sky the gods had raised. They stood beneath the stars, unsteady but awake. And the brothers looked on not as makers, but as witnesses. The world, for the first time, was not alone. Ask and Embla wandered the land. Their steps were light, their eyes full of wonder. And as they moved, the world seemed to listen. The rivers shimmered. The trees leaned in. The stars above glowed warmer. A new rhythm had begun, a breath shared between the earth and its children. And in that breath, the gods stepped back. Their work was done. The world would now carry its own story. And so, this is where our story ends tonight. From fire and frost, from silence and breath, a world was made. And from trees, 2 hearts began to beat. You've walked through the beginning of all things, and now it's time to rest. Let your thoughts drift, like stars across the sky. Let your breath slow, like waves against a quiet shore. The gods have stepped back. The world is calm, and you are safe. Sleep well, dreamer. May your night be deep, and may sleep come softly.